Good morning and welcome to the Schneider Electric EcoStruxure CyberSecurity learning session. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today to talk about, of course, our favorite topic, cybersecurity. My name is Jay Abdallah, and I'm the Global Director of Cybersecurity Solutions. I'm based in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And I have the pleasure of being joined on stage today by Mr. EcoStruxure, who is the Control Systems Manager at one of our customer sites in Thailand for SCG Chemicals, and also by Adam Gauchi, who is the Cybersecurity Marketing Leader for EcoStruxure Power. Today we're going to be talking to you about an extremely important topic surrounding something that really has captured the essence of digital security just in the past 10 to 12 years. And that topic is, of course, industrial cybersecurity. Now, when we talk about cybersecurity, what we're looking at here is not just one particular solution. We're not looking at technology. We're not looking at a specific endpoint protection solution. We're not looking at perimeter solutions. What we're looking at is an entire ecosystem of security posture. And security posture really relates to every aspect of our plant operations. That's every aspect, starting from physical security, including logical security, and that, of course, includes the personnel themselves. So individual training is extremely important. If you take a look at Google Maps and you search for Shaybah Airport, that's S-H-A-Y-B-A-H. For my friends in Saudi, you're probably very familiar with the Shaybah area. If you look at a Google Maps search of that area, and then you start to zoom out, you'll see there's actually a gas oil separation plant, 4 of them, in the middle of this empty Saudi quarter. It's about 400 nautical miles away from the nearest large city. What you'll see is that from a physical security perspective, just because of the environment surrounding them, from a physical security perspective, they're actually very well covered. As you get closer to any of these facilities within Shaybah, you'll see a bunch of guys standing in the back of a Ford F-150 pickup truck with a 30mm cannon. So you know you've gotten close to one of these Shaybah facilities. But most importantly here, what we're focusing on is an element of physical security. And you may not think so, but the reality is physical security is absolutely a part of cybersecurity because it's one of the first layers of defense. But there are still so many others. We're talking here about operations, we're talking about training, we're talking about human resources, and of course, at some point, the conversation will shift to technology. So what's the driver? We have to ask ourselves, where is this focus coming from? And what we're seeing is that there are 4 drivers of industrial security. One of them, of course, is connectivity. So we talk about our EcoStruxure grid, and you'll see a snapshot of that in just a moment. At that first low layer of connected products, this is where Schneider Electric has a responsibility to develop, using our security development lifecycle, products that are secure by design. That means from the factory, they are secure. They are designed as secure. However, when we take it to that next step, which is when we go above one layer and start interconnecting these devices together. So for example, if we connect a distributed control system into a plant infrastructure that also has a SCADA system, or may have a safety system, or may have a building management system, or may have any other industrial control element, this is where we have to start adding the element of risk. And with regards to that element of risk, interconnectivity is absolutely crucial to consider. Because we're not only talking about that lower level process, we're also talking about interconnectivity into the digital networks. So these are the higher level networks. Here we're considering L4 communications. So we're looking at enterprise networks into the cloud, for example, the business network. And what is the element of responsibility from an energy management company such as ourselves to ensure that our customers' data is always secure? We look here at mobility. And not just in terms of mobile devices, but also your ability to do your work and to be efficient while on the road. We give our customers the ability to have secure remote access into their facilities. So in that case, when it comes to your operational requirement, what is it that you seek in terms of getting the most out of your industrial systems? And what we believe is that you have the right, you need to be efficient and to consistently have operation and visibility into your networks in a secure manner, but also while you're on the road, so with mobility. When we look at cloud services here, we start looking at where does this data go eventually? And do we have the ability to service you in ensuring that your data not only is accessible at all times, but is also secure? And finally, what do we do with this data? Once you see it all in the cloud, the biggest mistake that we see in the industry when it comes to implementing security technologies is that we just don't know what to do with the data. There's just too much of it. So in that case, analytics becomes extremely important. Understanding what information is received and then knowing what to do with it. There are many different technologies and elements of technologies when it comes to protection, but if we're not exactly sure what to do with it, that data becomes almost useless. And that's why analytics is absolutely important. Now, we don't want to spend too much time on the doom and gloom, but of course, no cybersecurity presentation is complete without giving at least an overview of what the landscape looks like. So I'm just going to give you a brief bit of information. Just taking a look at how the threats have evolved from 2012 until just this year gives us a clear understanding of the element of responsibility. So when we look today at approximately 350,000 to 500,000 new pieces of malware written every day, we can clearly see that the landscape is ever evolving. And because it's ever evolving, we understand that there are risks associated with everything that we do. So we have to be vigilant. Now we're going to give one example of a recent situation. Adam's going to talk about it a little bit later on in the presentation, which kind of gives you a direct view into how a security scenario can have a direct impact on an electrical grid. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. First and foremost, however, when we talk about digitization and when we talk about the Internet of Things and the connectivity of all of these devices, especially in the coming 10 years, now we have to start looking at the risks that are introduced. We have a massive element of capability when it comes to connecting these devices. It gives us a certain sense of efficiency, a certain sense of performance, and certainly operational capability. However, at that same point, we have to consider the risks. There are absolutely ways to connect these devices to the internet, to connect our control systems to higher level networks, to share data and to get the most out of our data into the cloud in a secure manner. It's our responsibility to you to ensure that this data is kept secure. So when we look at the cybersecurity story, of course, that story revolves around three extremely important elements. And those elements are people, process, and technology. Now the first thing that comes up here, excuse me, the first thing that comes up here when we're talking about cyber is technology. And everybody may think that the technology portion is without a doubt the most important. That's actually not the case. The technology portion is typically the last element that we talk about. Now, before joining Schneider Electric, I was one of the senior security architects for Symantec Corporation. And 50% of my job was emergency response. So I was the guy that got the phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning when there was an emergency somewhere in the United States. I was put on a plane to remediate that emergency. It's called Computer Emergency Breach or Response Services. And what I learned, and I'll give you an example of this in just a moment, what I learned is that the vast majority of the situations that I personally faced were relatively easy to overcome because they all revolved around one very important topic, and that topic is the human element. It comes down to training. It comes down to education. And this is why Schneider Electric feels that it's our responsibility to provide you with an element of expertise at that individual level. So we're going to provide you with these services that give you life cycle security support. We're not just going to try and set a piece of technology in and advise you that this is now secure, and then of course step away. At the end of the day, we believe you need a security partner, and we're happy to be that partner for you. That brief example that I was talking about, anybody seen the movie Catch Me If You Can? Show of hands? Many people. Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. Of course, this depicted a real-life situation. This real-life situation was with a gentleman named Frank Abagnale Jr. Now, Mr. Abagnale Jr. Was, of course, very young when he started his criminal spree. He, in his short time of being a criminal, he pretended to be a pilot, he pretended to be a lawyer, and he also pretended to be a doctor during this time period. One of the biggest things, of course, that he did was figure out a way to write fraudulent checks. And he did so worth valued of millions and millions of dollars. As a matter of fact, when he was finally caught by the FBI, after spending some time in prison, the FBI felt that they simply weren't prepared for the onslaught of fraudulent behavior that was occurring in the financial sector. So they approached him and asked him whether or not he would be happy or he would be willing to help them in understanding how this fraudulent behavior can be tackled. So, of course, getting out of jail was a priority for Mr. Abagnale. He joined the FBI, and he's been with them now for 41 years. So there's a fantastic video. You can see it on YouTube. As a matter of fact, he did a keynote speech at Google. I believe it was last year in 2017. And he mentioned the fact that every FBI cyber breach that occurs, that goes through the FBI's desks, at some point passes through his eyes. So he is constantly watching for these types of events to occur. This is what he is responsible for now. I believe he's been doing cyber now for the past 15 years. And he said one thing with absolute certainty. Every single breach that he has worked on has fallen into two categories. Somebody doing something that they should not have done, or somebody not doing something that they should have done. Every one. And in my own experience, that was the vast majority of the cases as well. So when we take a look at, again, overall security, and we take a look at what is important when it comes to developing a security plan, without a doubt, technology is part of that formula. And without a doubt, the process is absolutely part of that formula. However, we must also focus on that human aspect. By creating training platforms, by creating educational platforms, not only in terms of awareness, but in terms of what our own companies are doing to mitigate the threats, that becomes the first area of responsibility. So now I'd like to introduce Mr. Ekachai, who is going to give you a brief overview of how Schneider Electric was able to meet some of SCG's security objectives. Mr. Ekachai, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. J. Everyone hear me? Firstly, I would like to introduce my company first. SCG Chemical is the one of the biggest integrated petrochemical business in Thailand, offering the full range of the petrochemical product, the ranking from the product of olefin to the downstream of the three main plastic resin, including polyethylene, polypropylene, and the polyvinyl chloride. We have more than 16 plants in Thailand. The starting point from the cybersecurity improvement at my plant. I think everyone heard about the WannaCry malware. It can be installed and wanted software in your machine, right? It can be stopped your machine. It can charge your money in your wallet. I think everyone heard about the hacker attack the energy plant to shut down the emergency shutdown system at the Middle East, right? Besides, I would like to prepare existing infrastructure to support the digitalized platform in the future, to support the more data exchange between the OT network and the IT network, like a process data, like a machine health. Finally, the manual cybersecurity update is not practical. We have more than 300 machines in the control network in the 16 plants in Thailand. So difficult to do like a manual update the window patch, the dash file to control the password changing, right? Then SCG set the team to resolve this issue, including the maintenance team, engineering team, the process technology team to pre-assessment. By scanning all the machines in the control network and analyze the existing infrastructure. The almost plant in SCG, we didn't have a zone of protection. We didn't have the level 3 and level 3.5 based on the IEC standard, right? The data from the level 2 sent directly to the SCG corporate via the one firewall, not safe, right? The one PAN, the TPC PAN was selected because the system were infected with the malware in the system. Then we collaborate with the Schneider to do assessment again. Schneider recommend me to sustain the cybersecurity by the quick win action and the long-term solution. I will show you. I think right now, network more secure by the quick win action, like update that file, the path file, improve the physical control. We install like an access card, like a CCTV at the control room and leg room, and improvement the cybersecurity policy and my plan. For the long-term solution, we implement by add the protection zone, the DMZ zone in the network. Right now, we have the WSA server to automatically deploy the dash file and the antivirus file. We have the domain controller to control the machine password changing like every 6 months, every 1 year. We have the AD server to back up the data every machine in control network by automatically, and can be restored if the machine lost the data. I think the important thing, the manpower is minimized due to automatic the system, and right now we ensure we can get the attack from the hacker, right? This one is a life cycle approach. The life cycle approach start with the assessment, collaborate with the Schneider to finding the gap, then design the secure architecture solution design together, like adding the DMZ zone, like improve the physical control, to implement cybersecurity control, like hardware and the software implementation, and the proactive monitoring of the network and the host security device. Finally, the maintain system upgrade, patch awareness, and the incident responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. EcoStruxure. This life cycle approach that you see and that Mr. EcoStruxure has followed as well is one of the key processes that we follow in Schneider Electric as well. Starting with an assessment, it's very, very important to understand where the risks exist in your critical infrastructure, in your critical buildings, in your critical site. So this is one key place to start in your journey on cybersecurity, is to know where your risks are. And from that, we can improve and we can maintain our best baseline through implementing the latest best-in-class cybersecurity measures in our systems and keeping them up to date. Cybersecurity is definitely one of these things. That's a continual process, and that's why it has to be a part of your life cycle. So again, my name is Adam Gauci. I'm working with the EcoStruxure Power Group. So my job is to help secure electrical infrastructure. And that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. That's my background. With cybersecurity, we talked about, Jay already mentioned, the people, process, and technology part of the core of cybersecurity that we need to follow. And Mr. EcoStruxure already mentioned the outside ring here, the life cycle that we approach. But now I'm going to talk a little bit about what can you do. And we have 4 key categories here in the middle of what we can do to help secure your system. The categories are permit, so how do I get access into my system? We have protect, so how can I protect against malware? How can I protect my network infrastructure? Detect, how can I detect something that's unusual in my network so I can react to an unusual situation or something that malicious that could be happening in my network. And last but not least, how do I respond? So in the case where something has happened, how do I come back into service? How do I get my plant running again? How do I restore my electrical grid? Those are the 4 categories. So I wanted to give a little bit of analogy because we talk about IoT, we talk about digitalization, and I want to give an analogy to the automotive industry. Everybody here is driving today. We imagine a car as being something that is mechanical by nature. But if we look at this car, we start to look at all of the different types of sensors and automation that's taking place inside inside a car today. For example, you have cruise control, you have backup cameras, you have automatic braking. And I can tell you an example that happened to me that was kind of interesting. Yeah, I just got a new car a few months ago, and just recently, actually it was like a week or two ago, I was driving around a roundabout in France, and all of a sudden, my car braked. And in fact, the car in front of me had just braked as well, and I thought, whoa, okay. Now I didn't rear end this guy in front of me. I was safe, and my wife was there, and she was quite oh, what happened? And it came up on the screen. It said automatic braking, city braking, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know my car did that. But then I started thinking about it a little bit, and I was like, whoa, my car just braked on its own. And I thought about it a little bit more, and I thought, whoa, what would happen if this happened on the highway? My braking can be controlled by a computer in my car. And on top of that, when my car is sitting at home in my garage, it's connected to my Wi-Fi. So it's constantly getting updates. So I was like, oh, that's kind of scary. What could that mean? What could be the implications of that? Is there any risk to that? So what's interesting about IoT is when we talk about electrical infrastructure, we're in the process now of digitizing this electrical infrastructure. That means, yeah, maybe there's a risk that something could happen that could cause a blackout, but the benefits are also there. We can save money on electricity by being able to monitor our energy efficiency in the system. We're able to make our electrical infrastructure safer. We're able to make our electrical infrastructure more reliable. By integrating in some of these sensors that we put into our electrical grid, by being able to meter our data and control our data more control our electrical grids more dynamically. And what we can find is the benefits of IoT far outweigh the risk, and we can manage the cyber risk to integrating IoT and to digitalizing our electrical systems. And these here are just some of the different types of solutions, the different types of measures you can implement in your electrical grid or your plant, in your process automation system, your DCS, your SCADA system, your OT systems. And a lot of times, you can use many of the off-the-shelf cybersecurity solutions that are existing out there, and you can have them tailored, and Schneider Electric can take you on that journey to tailor these solutions for your IoT systems, for your OT systems, and your industrial control systems. So I'm sure you've all seen throughout these last couple of days, you've heard a lot about EcoStruxure. So we do, in Schneider Electric, follow EcoStruxure for cybersecurity as well. We have end-to-end cybersecurity that allows you to be sure that you have a secure product or secure components in your system. We follow a secure development lifecycle to make sure that the products that you receive are developed in a secure way. We make sure that our products are containing the latest cybersecurity features and requirements, or meeting the latest requirements. We also make sure that our systems are able to be integrated with the latest best-in-class cybersecurity components. And we also have about 100 cybersecurity experts located around the world who can consult to help you secure your systems and to take you along on the journey of cybersecurity. So I want to thank you very much, and I want you to understand that. Yes, IoT is important. It brings us a lot of benefits. Digitalization is important. It brings us a lot of different types of benefits, as you've seen in the different types of booths here today. and that, yes, cybersecurity is a risk. It's a risk that is there. It's a risk that you have to manage, but the benefits far outweigh the risk when you want to enable IoT. With that, I'm going to open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Adam. So we've left a couple of minutes for question and answer session. If any of you have any specific questions for us, we're happy to answer them. And also we're going to leave just a few minutes at the end for Adam to share another story with us about a specific electrical scenario that did take place in Eastern Europe that will give you a little bit more visibility into how these systems are at risk when it comes to having any kind of outside penetration, of course, what the end results are. So, any questions for us, for Adam, myself, or for Mr. Ekachai? Questions? That means we either spoke too fast, which is what my wife always tells me, or we were perfectly clear and nobody has any questions. No questions. You have one question?
Oh, we have a question.
Okay. One thing that I like to understand is the balance. On one hand, industry push into digital. On the other hand, they also need to improve the cybersecurity. Moving into digitalization is already big investment. And now they also need to invest on the cybersecurity thing. So generally, how is the balance of cost between the putting effort into digital and being protected cyber security wise?
That's a great question. If I may, Adam, I'll answer this one. So the balance is typically, when we're looking at, for example, a greenfield project or a brownfield project, and we're looking to modernize and invest in our infrastructure to bring it up to modern standards, we call that digitization or modernization. The element of security is going to be a fraction of the cost of the OT infrastructure. So if we're looking, for example, take a greenfield project, something brand new, we're starting off from scratch, typically we're looking at anywhere between 7 to 12% of the network infrastructure to allocate for cybersecurity. So if we're looking at zoned infrastructure, network security, IDS, unidirectional diodes, and then of course several different host-based securities. If we're looking pure technical and not necessarily operational or training, it's about that number. But most importantly is just to understand the fact that security will never be the dominating factor with regards to us estimating our CapEx requirements, our CapEx budgetary requirements. It can start, as Adam had mentioned, with something as basic as an assessment. An assessment can be a relatively small OpEx expenditure. That being said, the ultimate deliverable here is nothing more than a report. That report will show you where your gaps are, and it'll give you an idea of what you need to handle immediately. It's called a gap analysis, and therefore you can help to design what you believe is required either to meet your own standards or an international standard that you may be obligated depending on which country you live in. So it's relatively small. The balance is relatively small compared to the overall OT infrastructure. And again, we like to always indicate the fact that if we simply don't know where to start, then an assessment might be the right answer. And that's a relatively small number. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, so Adam, you want to take us through really quick before we finish up about the situation that happened in the Ukraine, and then we'll ask our guests to meet us over at the booth.
Okay. Great, thank you, Jay. So imagine it's the end of the year, it's the end of your shift, and all of a sudden you're sitting in a control room, and all of a sudden at an electric utility, and all of a sudden all the breakers start opening up on your control panel, and there's nothing you can do about it. This happened in the Ukraine. There was 250,000 customers who were left in the dark. There was a blackout that was caused by a cyber attack. People are something that is very important. Every employee in your company needs to be aware of cybersecurity. In Ukraine, an employee mistakenly gave out their password not once but twice.
And that was through a phishing email, right?
That was through a phishing email. They had given out their password twice. And what happened was that an attacker was able to access the system, and they were able to stay in the system for 6 to 8 months before they actually before they had the attack, the day of the attack. So you can imagine these people had the attacker had months to be able to map out the system and find the weaknesses. And on the day of the attack, they were able to bring down an electrical UPS in a data center, servers for a DMS system, and substation gateways. They were able to break. So the impact was 250,000 customers were out. And if they had in place some cybersecurity monitoring, we talk about cybersecurity monitoring. We talked a little bit about it earlier. Monitoring allows you to be able to detect if there's a cybersecurity, if there's something suspicious happening in the network, and gives you the opportunity to react. And we have, at our booth, we'd like you to, if you have more information about cybersecurity monitoring, we have a demonstration of a cybersecurity dashboard over at the cybersecurity kiosk. And cybersecurity for us at Schneider Electric is something that covers everything in Schneider. So we're currently located between the cybersecurity, or the EcoStruxure plant and the EcoStruxure grid at the cybersecurity kiosk. If you have more or would like more information, please feel free to come by and chat with us. We'll be there for the rest of the day.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Mr. EcoStruxure, for joining us on stage today. Thank you, everybody, for attending the session.